When the dropship door hissed open, every alien officer in the landing bay paused to stare. The new cadet stood barely halfway up to most of their chests, her armor bulkier than her frame, her helmet tucked under one arm like she had simply walked into the wrong building. Kira Halden felt every one of their stares, but she didn't flinch. She had been told, repeatedly, that the Galactic Defense Legion was no place for baseline humans. Too fragile, too emotional, too chaotic. They preferred calm, towering species whose minds flowed like algorithms, soldiers who followed patterns and predictions as naturally as breathing. Kira didn't do predictable. She stepped forward, boots clanking against the metal floor, and the murmurs rose instantly. Why send a human? She'll break under fire. They're primitives. Does she even know modern targeting systems? Kira ignored them. Her instructors on Earth had downplayed expectations from the start. Blend in. Learn quietly. Don't give them a reason to send you home. But fate had other plans. Only 3 hours after she arrived at the Legion's Desert Forward Base, the alarms howled across the compound. Sirens blared, holographic warnings flashed, and the sky split open as enemy warforms descended. Towering machines that fought alongside an alien species whose computing systems could predict nearly every movement of a conventional army. Predictable armies lost. The Legion was about to learn that humans weren't predictable. As officers rushed toward bunkers and defensive lines, Kira saw a heavy emplacement cannon sitting unmanned on the western ridge, its operator wounded nearby, its targeting AI stuck in a reboot cycle. No one moved toward it. No one had the hands-on training to fire it manually. But Kira did. Her grandfather used to drag her into old scrapyards, teaching her how to operate rusted human artillery pieces from centuries ago. Machines have personalities, he'd say. If you treat them like predictable tools, they'll betray you. But if you feel them, listen to them, they'll follow you into hell. Kira slung her helmet on, sprinted past alien soldiers shouting at her to stop, and climbed behind the cannon. Her fingers danced across manual switches no one else knew how to use. The weapon thrummed to life with a roar. The alien officers turned in shock as the human cadet they had dismissed aimed a weapon older than the Legion itself, directly at the approaching warforms. Then she smiled just a little. Chaos suited her. She pressed the trigger. The cannon's recoil slammed through Kira's arms like a shockwave, but she held fast, bracing her feet in the sand and rubble. A streak of molten light ripped across the battlefield, cutting through the hazy atmosphere before slamming directly into the lead enemy warform. The alien officers watching from the barricades gasped. The warform staggered, not dodging, not adjusting, not predicting, because Kira's shot hadn't followed any trajectory the enemy systems were built to anticipate. The machine collapsed sideways, one of its 3 jointed legs blown apart, sparks spitting from cracked armor plates. For a heartbeat, the battlefield went quiet, just the echo of the cannon and the distant rumble of falling debris. Impossible, someone behind her whispered. The prediction mesh didn't register the shot. How can human aim be that? Random? Kira didn't look back. She could feel the weapon vibrating beneath her palms, overheating already, begging for cooldown cycles the automatic systems weren't providing. But she also saw the enemy forces resetting their formation, metallic bodies turning with eerie synchronicity. They weren't just analyzing her shot, they were rewriting their prediction models around it. Good, let them try. She grabbed a manual crank, one only human-designed machine still used, and swung the cannon slightly left. Not a smooth arc, not a calculated adjustment. A twitch, a jerk, a movement no machine learning model would classify as intentional. Kira fired again. This shot curved low, carving a trench of exploding sand before ricocheting off a half-buried metal plate and slamming into a second warform's torso. The Legion officers shouted, some in horror, some in awe. Ricochets weren't tactics. Ricochets were accidents. But humans had always been good at weaponizing accidents. Behind her, a towering reptilian commander sprinted up the ridge. Cadet Halden, That emplacement requires synchronized predictive alignment. You cannot simply. Another explosion cut him off as a third warform collapsed, its optical array shattered by shrapnel. Kira didn't have time to be yelled at. She didn't have time to explain that humans weren't wired like the rest of the galaxy. Where other species saw disastrous unpredictability, humans saw opportunity. Where others needed stable firing patterns, humans improvised. Where others calculated perfect strategies, humans made imperfect ones work anyway. She kept firing, reloading manually, adjusting instinctively, ignoring every procedure the Legion used to keep soldiers alive, procedures that would have gotten her killed already. The battlefield lit up with mismatched explosions, erratic shockwaves, and shouts from alien soldiers who didn't know whether to run or cheer. The Legion's predictive support system scrambled, unable to classify Kira's ballistic chaos as anything but noise. But the enemy struggled even more. Their perfect algorithms faltered, stumbling over her irregular rhythm like dancers tripping over broken steps. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy advance slowed. Kira allowed herself one breath of relief. Just one, because the ground beneath her suddenly trembled. A massive silhouette rose through the smoke, larger than the others, armored in thick plates that gleamed like obsidian. A command-class warform, a model designed to correct every predictive failure. And it was walking straight toward her. The command-class warform emerged from the smoke like a walking fortress. 2 stories tall, 6 jointed limbs, a central chassis covered in plated armor that reflected the desert sun. Its sensors glowed with cold intelligence, adjusting, focusing, recalibrating. Every step it took shook the ridge beneath Kira's boots. Every movement radiated confidence. It wasn't just another machine. It was the enemy's answer to unpredictability. The alien commander beside her stiffened. "Cadet, step away from the cannon." "Now." Kira didn't budge. "If I stop firing, the line collapses." "That thing," the commander hissed, "has a quantum adaptive targeting core. It will predict every move you make before you make it." Kira smirked. "Then I just won't make moves it can predict." This time, the commander had no answer. The war form raised an arm, 4 barrels unfolding like a metallic flower. And the cannon's targeting system screamed warnings. Its aim tracked her perfectly. Even when she crouched, shifted, or blinked, the war form adjusted instantly, as if reading her intentions before she knew them herself. This wasn't a duel. This was execution. Kira grabbed the cannon's crank and yanked it sharply, swinging the barrel away. But the machine's predictive core compensated before she even took aim. A bolt of blue plasma slammed into the ground inches from her boot, blasting a crater of smoking sand. Too close. Way too close. She could feel the machine studying her, parsing her reactions, building a model, anticipating every breath. "Fine," Kira muttered, wiping grit from her face. "Let's see how you handle something really stupid." She lifted her hands from the cannon entirely. No operator, no pattern, nothing to predict. The Legion commander stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Cadet, what are you doing?" Kira didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes, inhaled once, and kicked the cannon. Hard. The impact sent it lurching sideways, its barrel dragging across sand, sparks flying from overstressed joints. The predictive systems of both sides went wild, trying to understand the motion. Before the cannon even settled, Kira dove, literally dove, onto the gun's side panel, slamming the manual fire trigger with her elbow. The cannon fired. Not aligned, not braced, not stabilized. A completely catastrophic shot. A ballistic nightmare. A trajectory no algorithm would ever approve, analyze, or repeat. The glowing blast scraped across the battlefield like a skipping stone, hitting rocks, debris, metal fragments, and then impossibly ricocheting upward at a perfect angle into the exposed underside of the command-class warform. Direct hit, right into the joint that armored plating couldn't protect. The warform convulsed, its sensors flickering, then erupted in a bloom of flame and shattered plating. Pieces of burning metal rained down as its giant frame collapsed, shaking the earth. The Legion's soldiers stared in stunned silence. The alien commander's jaw hung open. Kira wiped soot from her cheek. "I told you," she said calmly. "Humans don't fight by the rules." The commander slowly turned toward her. "Cadet Halden," he swallowed. "Report to Command HQ immediately." The Command HQ wasn't a room so much as a fortress carved into the planet's bedrock. Walls pulsed softly with alien bioglass, threading data like veins. Holograms hovered in layered spheres, showing thousand-ship formations, enemy troop movements, and red zones where the Legion had already lost ground. But all eyes shifted when Kira entered, dust-covered, armor scorched, hair tangled with sand and smoke. A dozen alien officers stood frozen mid-briefing, staring at the human cadet who had just destroyed a machine designed to be mathematically undefeatable. The High Strategist, a towering, blue-chitin figure with crystalline ridges along his skull, was the first to speak. "You are the one who defeated the predictive war form." Kira shrugged. "More like, I confused it to death." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Legion strategy was built on precision, control, perfection. Chaos wasn't tactic. Chaos was failure. But the strategist leaned forward. "Show me," he ordered. A hollow screen blossomed to life, replaying the battle. The room watched Kira's insane dive, her reckless firing angle, the impossible ricochet. A few officers flinched. Others muttered translations of what were probably very rude alien curses. One slammed a tablet down in frustration. The angle she fired from had a 0.003% chance of striking a critical point, an officer barked. "No doctrine can incorporate such idiocy." Kira raised a hand. "I prefer the term creative tactics." The room fell silent, tension thick as atmospheric haze. Then the High Strategist stepped forward. "That 0.003%, he said quietly, "is the 1% the enemy cannot prepare for." He tapped his staff against the floor, and new projections formed. Enemy fleets, predictive cores, probability webs. All cold, all calculating, all expecting logical opponents. They believe they have mastered anticipation. The strategist continued. "They have forgotten what your species embodies, what your world forged you in." He turned toward her fully. "Uncertainty, instinct, irrationality, improvisation under pressure." He paused. "Cadet Kira Halden, we want you to lead a new division." Kira blinked. "A division? Of what?" The strategist's crystalline ridges glimmered. "Units trained to behave as only humans do, unpredictably." Kira stared, then laughed. "You're forming a chaos unit?" "Chaos Doctrine," he corrected, official designation. "If you accept, you will command the first experimental squadron." Her pulse quickened. She had come here as a joke, a charity cadet slot to satisfy diplomatic agreements. Now the entire command center waited for her answer. She took a breath. "All right," she said, "but if we're doing this, we're doing it my way." The strategist nodded once. "Then the war has a chance. Because somewhere beyond this planet, past the outer moons and debris rings, the enemy fleet was already reconfiguring, already calculating, already preparing counters. But they couldn't counter what they couldn't predict. They couldn't counter her. Training grounds across the Galactic Defense Initiative were sculpted with geometric precision. Perfect squares, symmetrical firing lanes, timed obstacles that rewarded predictable efficiency. Kira hated them instantly. "These courses," she said, hands on her hips, "are designed to teach soldiers how to behave like machines." The High Strategist's second in command, a tall insectoid officer named Shulrun, clicked his mandibles in confusion. "Efficiency is the highest virtue in combat." "For your enemies," Kira replied. "That's true. For us, it's a disadvantage." Behind her stood the cadets she'd been assigned, if you could call them that. A mismatched group of volunteers and disciplinary nightmares from across the initiative. The ones who didn't fit. The ones who questioned orders. The ones who made instructors sigh deeply and rub between their eyes. Perfect. There was Tovek, a bioengineered reptilian bruiser with the attention span of a comet. Leary, a tiny avian scout who panicked at silence but thrived in chaos. And Joran, a cybernetically augmented tactician who knew every rule but seemed physically incapable of following any of them. Kira clapped once. "All right, team, we're scrapping the course." Several aliens gasped as if she'd suggested detaching their limbs. Shulrun's antennae stiffened. "That course took 28 years to design, and we're ignoring it," Kira said brightly. "Instead, we're using this." She slammed a crate onto the ground. The lid popped open, spilling contents everywhere. Smoke bombs, old metal scraps, climbing spikes, tangled rope, empty weapon casings, and one object that made the observing officers recoil. A standard Terran baseball. "What," Shulrun whispered, "is that?" "A teaching tool," Kira said. The Chaos unit watched as she bounced it off a wall, caught it casually, then hurled it at Tovek. The reptilian yelped and ducked. The ball rolled past him. "Lesson 1, she said, "stop assuming everything is an attack." She threw another object, this time a smoke canister. It exploded. Cadets scattered in every direction, shrieking, tripping over each other. Kira nodded in satisfaction as the training ground dissolved into absolute disorder. Good, they were learning. When the smoke cleared, she gathered them again. "Our enemies rely on predicting patterns," she said. "So we're training to break patterns. No formation drills. No synchronized firing. No rigid protocols. We use unpredictability as a weapon. Controlled chaos." Tovek raised a claw. "What if we lose control of the chaos?" Kira grinned. "Then make it even messy, eh?" Shulrun made a distressed, warbling noise. "This violates every rule of combat doctrine." "Exactly," Kira said. "That's why it'll work." She showed them holos of the enemy's predictive technology. How it mapped probabilities, calculated trajectories, forecasted behaviors with terrifying accuracy. "And this," she said, holding up the baseball again, "is what breaks their entire system." The cadets looked baffled but intrigued. Kira suddenly felt it, something she hadn't felt since leaving Earth. Hope, because the galaxy didn't need perfect soldiers. It needed impossible ones, and she was about to build them. It didn't take long for rumors to spread across the Galactic Defense Initiative. At first, other units simply laughed. The Chaos Unit, as they'd been mockingly nicknamed, was assumed to be a joke. The rejects under the command of the unpredictable human cadet who'd barely passed entry evaluations. But the laughter started dying the moment instructors witnessed their training. The first time Kira brought her team to the open field testing grounds, dozens of cadets from other divisions gathered on the upper platforms just to watch the spectacle. They expected failure, disaster, humiliation. What they got was something else entirely. Kira placed her squad in a field littered with obstacles. Barriers, broken drone parts, metal fragments, and deactivated turrets. Nothing was arranged symmetrically. Nothing was meant to make sense. "Today," Kira said, "we test unscripted response." She tapped her wrist device. Instant chaos. Drones shot up from the ground in unpredictable arcs. Smoke vents burst open at random intervals. Flashbang lights popped overhead. A series of old mechanical traps clattered to life. None of them lethal. All of them irritating, disorienting, unpredictable. The instructors watching from above panicked before the cadets on the field did. But the Chaos unit? They adapted instantly. Tovek sprinted sideways, vaulting over a collapsing barrier that fell just a second earlier than predicted. Leary Dove threw a plume of smoke, wings tucked tight, emerging behind a drone that should have tracked her but couldn't. Joran used half a broken turret as a shield, moving at strange, jittering angles to confuse any sensors. Every one of them moved differently, chaotically, and yet together. Kira watched them from the sidelines without a weapon in hand. She didn't need one. She needed only to see how they reacted, how the training she drilled into them rewired their instincts. "Controlled chaos," she whispered. "Perfect." From the balcony above, a hulking crystalline officer narrowed its eyes. "This unit is a hazard. it said to the high strategist. Incorrect, the strategist replied, antennae lowering in deep concentration. It is fascinating. The crystalline officer scoffed. Their lack of structure is an embarrassment. No, the strategist murmured. It is disruptive, unpredictable. The enemy's systems cannot simulate what they cannot categorize. Down on the field, the drones intensified their attack. Patterns became tighter, movements more precise. Predictive AI compensating in real time. But the Chaos unit didn't fall into step or break into a formation the system could learn. They got wilder. Leary used Tovek's shoulder as a springboard. Joran rolled beneath an exploding decoy trap, popping up behind two drones and dismantling them faster than a training algorithm could classify the maneuver. Kira felt pride swell in her chest. They weren't fighting better than other cadets. They were fighting wrong. And in this war, wrong was exactly what humanity needed. The observers above fell silent. Finally, the crystalline officer muttered, "Can they do this under real fire?" Kira turned, hearing the doubt in their voice. "They already have," she said, "on their planets, in their lives. Chaos isn't a tactic for them. It's survival." The officer hesitated just for a breath. And in that moment, the galaxy began to understand something humans had known for millennia. Predictability wins battles. Unpredictability wins wars. The Galactic Defense Initiative prided itself on one thing: the Omega simulation. A combat test so advanced, so ruthlessly intelligent, that no cadet unit had ever completed it without total elimination. It was designed to mimic real battlefield unpredictability, but in truth, it wasn't unpredictable at all. It was hyper-predictable in the worst way. A machine that knew every behavior pattern ever recorded by any species in the initiative. The only way to survive was to be something the simulator could model. Something like Kira's unit. So when the high strategist summoned her and said, "Your team will run Omega at dawn," she felt a thrill, equal parts excitement and dread, twist in her stomach. "They're ready," she said firmly. "They are not," the crystalline officer behind him growled. "They're disorganized, unrefined, sloppy. They're alive," Kira shot back, "and Omega's never seen anything like them." The strategist's antennae dipped. "Then let the galaxy see your proof." When Kira and her cadets stepped into the colossal dome, the lights dimmed. Hundreds of instructors, officers, and elite warriors gathered in the observation rings above. It wasn't just a test anymore. It was a spectacle. The arena floor shifted underfoot, panels rearranging into an urban war zone, collapsed towers, burning debris, shattered skybridges, flickering hardlight ads. It looked disturbingly similar to the ruined colony Kira had fought on 2 years earlier when her world fell apart. Her hands trembled for a moment. Then she steadied herself. "You know the rule," she told her squad. "Nothing is predictable. Not even us. Especially not us." They nodded. Omega activated. A siren shrieked. Red lines rippled through the air as the simulation's predictive algorithm scanned the battlefield. Drones dropped from the ceiling like metallic spiders. Turrets unfolded from hidden slits. Heat signatures locked on. The system calculated their probable movements. And got its first surprise. Tovek ran toward the nearest explosion. Not away. Before Omega could recategorize his threat trajectory, he used a shockwave to launch himself onto a balcony, flattening 2 drones with the weight of his reptilian bulk. Leary blurred into flight in twitchy, uneven bursts, zigs and zags that made the tracking lasers sweep wildly in the wrong directions. Joran hacked into a fallen turret, but didn't take control of it. Instead, he rewired it to fire in random arcs, forcing the simulation to waste processing power predicting meaningless patterns. Kira moved through the environment like she wasn't even playing the same game. Knees scraping rubble, sliding under drooping cables, bouncing off crumbling walls. Using terrain not as cover, but as chaos. Omega struggled, and then it escalated. Hard. Buildings shifted violently. A shockwave knocked Kira onto her back. From the smoke emerged the simulation's deadliest unit. The Reaper mech, a towering quadruped with quantum-level prediction processors. It froze for a microsecond, calculating Kira's next move. Then it fired, except it missed. Kira hadn't dodged. She hadn't moved at all. The mech's aim had assumed she would. She grinned. Let's break a machine's brain. The squad erupted into pure, beautiful disorder. Actions so irrational, so instinctive, so unpatterned that Omega's predictive model began to stutter. Its turrets misfired. Drones clipped into walls. Threat assessments looped. For the first time since its construction, Omega hesitated. And in that hesitation, Kira saw victory. She sprinted straight at the Reaper mech, vaulted onto its front limb, and drove a training blade into its sensor cluster. The mech sparked, convulsed, then went silent. A shockwave of energy rippled across the arena. The dome lights restored. Silence. Officers stared down, stunned. Kira and her unit stood in the rubble, panting, bruised, filthy, but alive. The strategist whispered, almost reverently. Impossible. Kira shook her head. Human, she corrected. And above them, for the first time in initiative history, the Omega simulation scoreboard flashed. Unit survive complete. 3 days after the Omega simulation, the galaxy changed. Kira felt it before she heard it. An uneasy vibration running through the station floors, a subtle shift in the air pressure, a tension in the comm channels that experienced soldiers recognized instinctively. War. Real war. She was in the middle of training Tovek on irregular movement drills when every alarm in the alien base erupted at once. Red emergency glyphs flashed across the walls. The comm towers held a warning in 12 species languages simultaneously. Enemy fleet detected. All personnel to battle stations. Tovek froze. Is this another drill? Kira's voice dropped into the tone she hadn't used since her homeworld evacuation. No, this is the real thing. Leary swooped down from the rafters. How many ships? Enough, Kira said, reading the incoming data as the Chaos unit assembled behind her. The holographic tactical map projected the impossible. A hostile armada larger than anything the initiative had seen in generations. Worse, its signature belonged to the Dominion of Calculus, a machine-guided empire whose military doctrine revolved around a single terrifying strength. Perfect prediction. The same enemy that annihilated the Zyran fleets. The same one that forced 3 star nations into unconditional surrender. The same one whose technology had nearly wiped out Kira's home colony years before. Their targeting systems could read intentions faster than a biological brain could form them. Most species fought and died. Exactly the way the machines expected. But this time, the galaxy had something different. A human, and a squad built from chaos. Kira barely reached command before she was intercepted by High Strategist Vorthal himself. Kira Vance, he said, not bothering with formalities. You and your team are being deployed. The crystalline officer beside him nearly choked. Them? They're an experimental unit, barely stabilized, structurally incompatible with initiative doctrine. Exactly, Vorthal cut in, and the Dominion has accounted for every doctrine we possess except theirs. He turned to Kira. Your unpredictability may be the only countermeasure we have. Kira swallowed hard. You want us on the front lines? The strategist leaned in, voice low. We want you on the enemy flagship. Silence hit the room like a shockwave. Kira blinked. That's a suicide assignment. No, Vorthal said. It is a necessity. The Dominion fleet is coordinated through a single central nexus aboard their command ship. Destroy it, and their predictive capabilities degrade by 60%. Perhaps more. The crystalline officer hissed. You cannot be serious. Sending these misfits into the heart of a precision-driven machine empire. Vorthal's antennae lowered. That is precisely why they may succeed. Kira glanced back at her team. Tovek, breathing hard but ready. Leary, wings shaking but with sharpened eyes. Joran, already analyzing the Dominion's data streams with frantic excitement. The Chaos unit. Her unit. All right, she said. We'll take the mission. In the deployment hangar, ships clattered into launch positions. Pilots shouted coordinates. Engineers strapped in warheads. Officers barked orders fast enough to blur into noise. But the Chaos unit? They prepared differently. Tovek filled his armor pockets with random debris. These confused scanners, he explained. Leary strapped 3 mismatched knives to her leg. One of them will matter. I don't know which yet. Joran carried an entire backpack of useless scrap metal. I'm calling it my improvisation kit. Kira herself holstered the ancient ballistic weapon she'd retrieved from Earth, the same one she'd used when the Dominion first slaughtered her colony. It wasn't advanced. It wasn't elegant. But it had one trait no machine could simulate. As they boarded their infiltration craft, the alarms blared even louder. The first wave of Dominion fighters dropped out of warp in blinding formation. Their trajectories flawless, their synchrony terrifying. Tovek whispered, "We're actually doing this." Kira nodded, jaw tight. "This time," she said, "we bring chaos to them." The hangar doors opened, space filled with fire, and the Chaos unit launched into war. The infiltration craft shook so violently that Kira had to brace herself against the bulkhead just to stay upright. The Dominion fighters weren't wasting time. Sleek, angular shapes cut through the darkness, their flight paths perfectly synchronized. No hesitation, no drift, no wasted motion. Every second, their predictive cannons fired exactly where initiative ships were going to be, punching holes through the fleet before the pilots even realized they were targeted. Kira felt a sick familiarity crawl up her spine. This was how her colony died. Precision so flawless it felt like fate. Not this time. "Joran, scramble our output signature," she said. "Already on it," he replied, fingers dancing over a jury-rigged console he'd literally taped to the wall. "I'm feeding false telemetry into their prediction net. For the next 8 minutes, we'll look like we're piloted by a drunken tree frog." Tovek blinked. "Is that good?" "It's unpredictable," Kira said. So yes, the craft jerked sideways at a mathematically perfect angle, except Kira overrode the flight assist mid-maneuver, slamming the ship into a wildly illogical spin. The Dominion targeting lasers swiped past harmlessly, unable to track the movement because no trained pilot in the galaxy would ever choose to fly like this. Leary hung from her harness, feathers flattened back. "I'm going to molt after this." "Molting later," Kira said. "Surviving now." Ahead, the Dominion flagship loomed, a monolithic construct of black alloy and pulsing blue latticework, like a cathedral built by machines that worship probability itself. It dwarfed the battlefield, absorbing all light into its angular hull. That was their destination, their target, and possibly their tomb. Tovek stared in awe. "How do we get inside that?" "We don't go through the defenses," Kira said. "We break the pattern." She pushed the ship into a dive, so steep the hull screamed. Dominion interceptors followed, but the human-made ballistic weapon strapped to Kira's back began rattling against the metal bench in a rhythm that sparked an idea. "Kira," Joran said nervously, "whatever you're thinking, we're going to mimic engine failure," she said. "I hate it," but it was too late. Kira powered down the main thrusters, vented atmosphere from the side panel, and tilted the craft into a spiraling plummet. It didn't look like piloting. It looked like disaster. Dominion fighters scanned the trajectory, predicted total loss in 2.8 seconds, and disengaged, abandoning the crashing craft as irrelevant debris. "Of course they did," Leary muttered. "Machines don't waste resources." Kira reignited the thrusters at the last possible moment. The ship leveled out inches above the flagship's hull and skimmed along its surface. "There," she shouted. "Maintenance access port." Joran fired a magnetized tether. It clamped onto the hull with a mechanical snap. The craft locked into position as the Chaos unit scrambled into their gear. The metal beneath their boots vibrated with the pulsing rhythm of the Dominion's central nexus, like a mechanical heartbeat echoing across a vast, cold empire. "This is it," Kira said quietly. "Once we're inside, it won't just predict our moves. It'll predict our intentions. So stay chaotic. Stay irrational. Stay us. Tovek cracked his knuckles. I was born irrational. Jor nodded. Same. Leary tightened her grip on her mismatched knives. Let's be impossible. Kira placed her hand on the hatch control, feeling the weight of the ancient ballistic weapon across her back. Then let's go break their future. The hatch hissed open, and the Chaos unit stepped into the belly of the machine. The interior of the Dominion flagship was a cathedral of black steel and glowing conduits. Every surface thrummed with energy, the pulse of computation resonating through the floors, walls, and ceilings. Kira led her team carefully, yet with purpose, through narrow corridors that seemed impossibly precise, every angle engineered to channel movement predictably. The Dominion had anticipated intruders, certainly, but only ones that acted like intruders. Not humans, not chaos. Tovek grunted as he hauled a heavy panel aside, exposing a labyrinth of maintenance conduits. Feels wrong, he muttered. Too quiet. Perfect, Kira replied, her voice low but firm. Quiet is boring. Boring is predictable. We're not boring. The squad moved with instinctive irregularity, taking uneven strides, splitting up in patterns that made no sense mathematically. Joran kept feeding phantom signals into the Dominion Nexus, scrambling sensors and overloading predictive subroutines. Leary flitted ahead like a feathered shadow, her wings folding and unfolding in jittery, untrackable patterns. They reached the first chamber of the Nexus. A massive core of spinning quantum circuits radiated blue light, suspended in a field of protective graviton grids. The entire ship seemed to pivot around it. Kira's pulse quickened. One touch, one wrong move, and the entire vessel could lock them out, or worse. Here, she whispered, this is the brain, and brains are fragile. All we need is one good disruption. She pulled her ballistic weapon from her back, running a practiced hand over the old manual mechanisms. It wasn't just a tool, it was a philosophy. Old, imperfect, unpredictable, and exactly what the Dominion couldn't calculate. Tovek looked uncertain. Do we get clever? Kira finished for him. No. We get stupid. The Chaos unit exchanged glances, a shared grin passing silently among them. Stupid, in this context, was brilliance. It was unpredictability incarnate. Kira stepped forward. On my mark, total chaos. She slammed the weapon's firing lever, and the room exploded, not with destruction, but with disruption. Sparks arced erratically, circuits shorted, and the quantum core shuddered. The graviton grids flickered. Joran's hacked signals amplified the confusion, and Leary's erratic flight pattern blocked visual sensors. The Dominion Nexus tried to calculate their movements, tried to adapt, and failed spectacularly. The lights shifted wildly. The spinning quantum circuits rattled. Systems that had never misfired now sputtered, sparked, and went silent. Kira grinned, heart pounding. Phase 1 complete. From deep within the ship, an alarm shrieked. A high, piercing tone that indicated the Nexus itself was initiating countermeasures. The Dominion was awake and angry. The Dominion responded faster than any battlefield report had ever suggested possible. Bulkhead doors slammed, corridors shifted, and automated defense drones activated with lethal precision. The ship itself seemed to bend reality to corner intruders, herding them into kill zones designed to eliminate unpredictability. Kira didn't flinch. Of course it's angry. We just insulted its brain. Tovek growled, swinging a heavy spanner at a pursuing drone. Sparks erupted, and the machine toppled in a cascade of metal. Leary zipped past, scattering sensor swarms like leaves in a storm. Joran's hands moved furiously, rerouting power lines and feeding false positional data into every system they passed. Every step we take, Kira muttered, they'll try to anticipate. So we don't take steps, they follow us instead. Patterns be damned. They reached a junction where the corridors twisted impossibly, like the ship itself was trying to trap them in recursive loops. From above, turrets pivoted smoothly, calculating angles with quantum precision. Kira grinned. Time for planned chaos. She leapt onto a support beam, swinging over the turrets in an uneven, unpredictable arc. Tovek followed with a thundering crash, sending the floor panels vibrating. Leary flitted along the walls, wings beating in erratic pulses. Joran hacked a nearby control panel, rerouting turret fire into empty sections of the ship. The Dominion's systems faltered. Its predictive model tried to map Kira's squad, but every action contradicted the last. Each misstep, each mistake, each unpredictable jump became another error the Nexus couldn't process. The quantum core pulsed violently, warning of imminent failure. Dominion engineers, or whatever passed for them, rushed through the corridors, but even they were moving at the pace of patterns of logic. Humans, of course, had none. Kira pressed her hand against the hull of the core chamber. Almost there, she whispered. Remember, chaos is our shield. Another surge of sparks erupted. Alarms wailed. A drone crashed nearby, scattering fragments across the floor. And then, in the central chamber, the gravity fields that protected the Nexus began to destabilize. Kira looked at her team, wide-eyed and smiling through grime and soot. Ready for the finale? Tovek bared his claws. Leary flared her wings. Joran tapped a few last keys. Let's make them regret underestimating humans. The ship shook violently, the pulse of its systems faltering for the first time in its existence. Kira's hand tightened on the old weapon, the one thing no prediction could account for. Instinct. The final chamber of the Nexus stretched before them like the heart of a dark star. The quantum circuit spun faster than any eye could follow, a lattice of blue light crisscrossing endlessly, humming with deadly precision. Every predictive subroutine the Dominion had ever built converged here, focused on maintaining control over the galaxy's most ruthless fleet. Kira stepped forward, weapon in hand, boots scraping against the humming floor. The Chaos unit fanned out around her, moving in staggered, unpredictable steps that made even the graviton fields hesitate. Remember, she said, voice steady, perfection predicts death. Chaos predicts life. Let's live. She slammed the weapon into the central Nexus housing. Sparks flew. Circuits flared. The lattice writhed like a living thing, trying to compensate. Tovek barreled into a support beam, sending it crashing into a nearby conduit, shorting half the defensive grids. Leary darted through the room in erratic loops, scattering sensor arrays with every flap of her wings. Joran's improvised hacks overloaded the core's feedback loops, forcing the quantum processors into a recursive spiral of errors. The Nexus pulsed violently, a deep, resonant hum that shook the hull. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the Dominion flagship quaked as the systems that had never failed before began misfiring in unison. Now, Kira shouted. She fired the old ballistic weapon one last time, a wildly improbable shot that ricocheted off multiple conduits before striking the heart of the Nexus. The core exploded, not with a neat, precise detonation, but in a chaotic storm of plasma arcs, fractured circuits, and sparks raining like fireflies. The Dominion fleet's command network faltered instantly. Ships lost synchronization, weapons misfired, and the once perfect armada veered into chaos, unable to anticipate even each other's moves. Kira and her team scrambled back, rolling over fallen panels as the chamber shook around them. The floor cracked, and the walls trembled, but they were alive. When the dust settled, silence fell, a heavy, electric silence. The Dominion flagship, once a monolith of perfect calculation, floated like a broken toy, its fleet scattered and disoriented. Kira wiped soot from her face, chest heaving. Tovek slumped next to her, grinning despite several cracked scales. Leary perched on a broken conduit, wings drooping but eyes shining. Joran adjusted his console, beaming. "We did it," Leary whispered, disbelief in her voice. "No," Kira said, shaking her head, a wry smile on her face. "We did what humans do best. We made the impossible messy. Across the galaxy, reports began to flood in. Dominion fleets were retreating, their predictive systems crippled. Worlds that had been on the brink of conquest breathed freely for the first time in decades. Back at the Galactic Defense Initiative, the High Strategist's message was simple. The Chaos Unit has proven what logic cannot. Humanity's unpredictability is our greatest weapon. Kira looked at her team, battered, exhausted, but alive. Chaos had won. She laughed softly, a sound that carried the promise of more. All right, team, who wants to go make the rest of the galaxy impossible? And the Chaos Unit, for the first time in history, marched together. Unpredictable, unstoppable, and perfectly human.